Hey, so, oh, great. Guna's online. Great, fantastic. I was waiting for some people to join online. So welcome everyone to the SLIM meeting. We're going to begin now. I have an awful habit of speaking really quickly in a lot of situations, so please tell me to slow down if I'm over talking. Cool, I have some things to go through to start the meeting. There's the Jabber room there, and we have a document for taking minutes. Does anybody mind scribing in the room? No, because I'm going to ask Mark. Meetings will begin momentarily until we have a scribe. Nominate someone. Nominate who? Martin, can you scribe? No? That's just a flat out no. Could we have two scribes? The one can do one half and the other one can do the other half.
Clarifying, I think Natasha is not looking for a transcript here. She's just looking for notes and action items.
That is true, and I was
something to help her take minutes without having to listen to the audio.
We don't need to do complete
times.
scribing, just notes and action items, yes.
Hey, thanks, Brian.
Thank you very, very much. The scribe link is on the page there. You can scribe in Jabber, you can scribe there, either is fine. Okay, excellent. Let me just drop it into the Jabber for you, just because it makes it a little easier. Thank you very much, Brian. Cool, all right, so we've got some stuff to go through before we begin. Remote attendees. We have remote attendees and remote presenters for this meeting. So when you want to speak, please come to the microphone and also please shout to me if I've not seen that somebody is on the queue remotely. We are going to send round the blue sheets. Mark, would you mind sending around the blue sheets? Thank you so much. And we've sorted out the scribe and the Jabber, which is the Jabber at slim@jabber.ietf.org if you want to join and have some discussions on there. Excellent. Just a note on your chairs. Bernard Aboba, everybody knows Bernard, or should do. He was an IAB chair for a while and does some work in the W3C with WebRTC and contributed to a bunch of RFCs here at IETF. And I'm a newbie, worked as a web and internet technologist at GSMA. Mark Nottingham's kindly here to make sure that I don't mess this up first time. So it's going to be okay. Just a reminder of the Notewell. Hopefully this is not news to everyone. We'll be conducting the meeting under the Notewell. If you have any problems, please let me know. Bernard, who wrote these slides, included a section on intellectual property. If you have any worries, don't say anything. Let's discuss them afterwards. That's probably the best thing that we can do. Cool, some SLIM information. We are a new group and we have a lot of different ways to do work, a lot of different links which shouldn't be news to you guys. Our mailing list is slim@ietf.org. Please subscribe if you have not done already. There's a fair amount of traffic, it's not an overload, so you guys should be okay. Our document status is on data tracker. We're going to go through that a lot today. And we have an issues list as well, where we'll be logging the actions of this meeting. Our Jabber room and Meet Echo room, we've added up there for this meeting. And Bernard included a Jitsi Meet room. This is not something I'm familiar with. If somebody wants to enlighten me afterwards, please let me know. Cool. Just another reminder, we have remote presenters, we have remote participants, so please make sure you speak clearly, state your name at the microphone, standard bits and pieces, and slow down for anybody who doesn't have English as their native language, of which there will be many people here. Cool, so let's move on to the agenda. I've gone through a bunch of the section there, so of the first preliminary stuff, so I'm afraid we can't bash that because it's already gone. If anybody has other agenda bashing, please let us know now. Just to run through it quickly, Bernard and Guna are going to take us through some use cases and the charter, and then we're going to look at our proposed work items, of which we have 2 right now. Later we're going to talk about whether we want to do any more work on top of that. and how this group management, the general management and work methods of the group and how it's going to be run. So, any agenda bashing? Great, cool. So as just a quick overview of our document status, we're going to go up to these a few times. I think if you're following on data tracker, where is my mouse? My mouse is here. Yeah. Oh, this is just a charter, sorry. So you can see the status of our 2 drafts in data tracker. And we're going to go through this today, like I said before. We were going to have Bernard to walk us through the working group charter, but I don't see him on Meet Echo. So if you give me a few minutes to find out what's happened to him, and then we can get him up to go through that. Right, let's see. Actually going to open Skype to see if we can get hold of Bernard, seeing as this is how we usually talk. I wonder whether this is a daylight savings time issue. And I'm not too sure where Gunnar is.
Did you say Gunnar or Bernard?
No, we said Bernard, but I think maybe he's dialing in right now. Otherwise, I'll start and go through his item. But thank you for checking, Gunnar. I suspect it's a daylight savings time issue. As Bernard is joining, at least I managed to get hold of him, so he should be joining quickly. The full text of the charter can be found at that URL at the normal data tracker link. We have 2 specific use cases. Effectively, we're looking at the main use case of adding language selection, most likely to SDP, but we're going to have discussed that and how it goes in the actual drafts. For real-time use cases and for non-real-time use cases, some of the key use cases that we're looking at is around emergency calling. There are some discussions as to whether that should not be just emergency calling, but perhaps other use cases as well. And Bernard will hopefully give us a little bit more of an overview of his thoughts after that. One key thing for things which are not in our charter are routing decisions. We're not routing is not of the callings, not all the messages is not in the charter, and some other things that are collected on that slide. Hopefully, Bernard will come and join us and give us a little bit more overview of that. He says Bernard is on, but he can't find the speaker URL. Okay. I don't know if it's the same as Gunnar's. Be the same as Gunnar's. And we did have a Meet Echo URL on the slides, so let's see if we can grab it from there. The Echo Room. Oh, you're just going to open it for me, aren't you? That's very evil. I want you. Cool. All right, let's see if we can get him to join.
Okay, yes, I'm on as a speaker now.
Brilliant, thank you so much. Bernard, I gave a very poor overview of the charter. You're probably better to go ahead and do that. So I'll go back to those slides and you can give some overview of that, okay?
Okay, great. Okay, the full text of the charter is up online, but we'll just try to give you a very brief summary. There are two basic use cases for this working group. One is email, where different recipients require different languages. And the second one is real-time communication, where one party wishes to accommodate people with varying language and media needs. The group initially will not be focusing on supporting language-based call routing decisions. And the goals and milestones are basically for March to have both of the documents ready for the IESG. So one thing that is not in the SLIM working group charter, but did come up during the approval process relating to it, was a document relating to security and privacy issues, not only arising from inclusion of human language, but potentially other personal information within SDP. As I understand it, Barry, I guess this document is not on the charter, but could be AD sponsored, assuming that enough people can be solicited to write it. I think based on the discussion on the list, Brian Rosen and others have pointed out that the security privacy issues are fairly well understood. So I would anticipate that this is a document that could be written, but obviously we need the people to actually do it. And I don't
Bernard,
know if Barry
this
wants
is
to
Robert
comment.
Stark.
Yeah,
I apologize. We're getting the AV people here to try to help, but we'd like to ask if you could help at your end more quickly. The feed that you have into the room is set at kill ears to death, bleeding loud. If you have the ability to move your microphone away a little bit or ratchet its sensitivity down, we'd be doing a lot better. We'll get AV to work on it here, but I just wanted to see if you could fix it faster. Sorry for the interruption.
Yeah, Adam just did something, so maybe it's okay. So Bernard, continue. Yeah, test it.
Yeah, before Bernard continues, let me step in and comment on what he was just talking about. Yeah, Stephen, I believe, is going to be the driver for that and is looking for someone who could author it. If it's AD sponsored, it's likely to be sponsored by either me or Stephen, and this working group will definitely have to review it. So.
And this is Ben Campbell. A related question on your first bullet. The thing that we're not doing is talking about including of other personal information other than human languages. I assume we'll still cover the security and privacy issues about the actually including of human language part.
well, that's a great clarification. Okay, so we can just focus on the human language issue in this document. Yeah, in his comments, Stephen mentioned other things as well.
Not saying.
Oh, you were asking. Oh, I thought
Yes.
you ADs have all the answers. Sorry.
Well, this document will have to have the usual security considerations that any other document has, and it's no different.
And possibly privacy considerations.
Right. Yes, exactly. It just does not have to do a comprehensive review of, you know, the universe.
Okay. That's nice. Okay, so I think that's it.
Oh, we have somebody else on the queue.
This Randall Gallons, I just wanted to point out that it's a little unusual, more than a little unusual, to ask a working group to do a document on security and privacy issues for work that's not within its scope. That just seems really bizarre. It seems to me that if such a document is needed, it should be done wherever the work that is beyond human language is done.
And that's why it was removed from the charter.
Okay. I see nobody else on the queue. So we did have a feedback page. I guess we've covered all of that. Bernard, anything else to say regarding the charter?
No, I think that's it. Thanks, Natasha.
Okay, great. So we'll move on then to our next agenda item, which is use cases. Where did my use cases slide go? Here we go. Good. So Gunnar's going to take us through the use cases. He is also dialing in remotely. Gunnar, are you there? Can you
Yes, I am.
speak?
Do you hear me well?
We do hear you well. Just tell me when you want me to go through the slides and I'll do that for you here.
Okay. Yeah, I'm Gunnar Hellström from Omnitor, and I'm working in an IETF about emergency services for total conversation, which is all media, video, audio, and real-time text, and have these calls to be handled well. And then we come into the language issues. So next slide, please. I need to flip myself here.
Yeah, this is the accessible communication slide.
Yeah. So a lot of our work ends up in accessibility issues where you need other media and other modalities than speech in the call. There is good support from policy statements everywhere about that we shall provide suitable services for disabled people. And that can mean, for example, for deaf users, that they get a chance to use video for sign language communication. For other deaf users, it can mean that they need to use text for typed communication. And if you get deaf by age, you may need to use, still want to use talking speech for your output, but need to read text for your input. Deafblind is a varying group. Some deafblind people still talk, but need to read enlarged text back. Other deafblind users are more used to using sign language for their output, but need to receive text back. And they can locally on their devices display the text as braille if they need, or as enlarged text if they need that. Other deafblind users maybe use type text out and receive text back, so same as the first deaf type of users. And then we have another group, those with speech disabilities are also varying. Some want to hear speech and type text out, and others try to speak and have a service called speech-to-speech to clarify the speech for them when it's needed and hear the answers. So you see, there is a lot of variation in the accessibility area of the needs of the users, and having these three media that we are working with, the real-time text, video, and audio, gives a good opportunity to select and pick what's needed for the moment in a call. And I need to comment that sign languages are varied. There are as many sign languages as spoken languages in the world, so language tags for sign languages are very appropriate. So next slide, please. Now, most people just handle speech or possibly text. So how can we link in these disabled people to the community in general? There are services called relay services that can cater for that, and they translate between different human languages and modalities so that we can have a match if there is no match between the humans involved in a call. The current relay services are, for example, when you need sign language and, well, they translate between sign language and speech. They are called video relay services used by deaf people. There are also those converting between text and speech, the text relay services. And then the services for speech disabled people that translate from different, for example, vague speech or unarticulated speech to clear speech. That's the speech-to-speech relay. And then there is a special kind of text relay where the text is added rapidly as captions to the voice. The voice is still taken through and text added rapidly so that you can have a call where you can select between hearing and reading. Very popular among adult deaf people. And then there is a possibility to have special relay services for deaf-blind people where you can have sign language to the user and text from the user, and all these converted to speech. When we design these services, it's important to remember that users prefer to communicate directly without any relay if it's feasible, if the conversation flows happily, rapidly with the media that you have in common. It is also preferable to have mainstream terminals so that you can have an off-the-shelf mainstream terminal and use it for your daily communication if it supports the required media in a suitable way. Also, when making a phone call, it is preferable to just call the number you want to call and get a relay service invoked in the call if it's turned out to be needed by the discrepancies in the media support or modality support, I mean. And we are talking about the emergency case, but it is very important to have the everyday terminal and the everyday settings also to be usable for the emergency case. You cannot remember to get an other terminal and an other settings special for the emergency case. Must be what you use in everyday calls. There are not much standards for relay services, but there is a service level standard in ETSI, ES22975. But that's on a high service level, tells what these services are about. There is still no complete technical level standard for relay service, the interfaces to them. And part of that would possibly be to act on language discrepancies and invoke relay services for that in a suitable way. So next slide, please. So how does SLIM come into this picture? Yeah, what we see here is that a method is needed that invokes a relay service when a call is established between two parties where you don't have any matching modalities and languages. You can imagine that you can have the user to tick a box saying, I want the sign language relay service now in this call. But then it is anticipating that the other end does not support sign language. And for example, if you happen to have an emergency service handling sign language, then you'll get an unneeded extra service complicating the call. So it would be better to have this sensing of discrepancies and connect relay services only when needed. So the emergency case is one of the important cases, but as I said before, it is equally important to have it in your everyday call. And the SLIM indication of language and modality seem to be a good way to act on this and get the proper service invoked if needed. And the picture shows an emergency service case where on the middle top you have a relay service that is invoked in the call if it is found needed. And that is what, well, one of the cases we want to achieve. And next slide, please. So I have collected a set of imagined use cases, starting with the simple ones and then adding a bit of complexity. So the simple ones are when you have just one modality. I happen to use an Italian as a specific use case example. So we have an Italian sign language user. He has a setting that indicates a preference for Italian sign language in video both ways. So you want to sign out and get signed back. Now, what happens if this user calls an Italian speech user? The language and modality and media needs are compared during the call setup, and they don't match. The Italian video relay service is invoked as a third party in the call. And here we imagine that the speech user did not have any settings because we cannot expect everybody to have the language settings from beginning. So it should be a default saying that when those settings, it is spoken language. The relay service is invoked anyway. Second example is when the Italian sign language user calls another Italian sign language user. The comparison of language and modality tells that these persons match and no relay service is needed and they can have a direct call. Next is that you need also this function for incoming call. So if an Italian sign language user get a call from an Italian speech user, the same thing happens, that the languages are compared, and it is found that you need the relay service, the video relay. It is invoked in the call. And then the emergency case, the Italian sign language user calls 112 for emergency in Italy. So assuming that the emergency service has next generation 112 installation and they can handle video, real-time text and audio, but the manning only handles speech and not the sign language. So therefore the comparison is made and it's found that a relay service, video relay is needed and it's invoked in the call setup. The other media are shared between all. I mean, all three media are shared so that the PSAP, the emergency service PSAP can follow what's happening also in video, but the relay service is needed for the conversion. And next example is more complicated. The Italian user travels to Poland and have an emergency there. Oh, sorry, next, no. We are still on the previous slide.
Oh, sorry, that was my fault.
Simple use case is last thing. So we have the user in Poland and makes an emergency call there. The comparison is made and found that the Polish 112 emergency service brings in, well, the video relay is brought in, but the spoken languages, those don't match. and some extra action is needed to also make the spoken languages between the Italian video relay service and the Polish 112 service. Maybe they can bring in an English-speaking Polish 112 handler and an English-speaking video relay agent in Italy, or they need to bring a third party, a spoken language interpreter as well. Still, that was regarded to be a simple use case because it is only one language both ways in one of the media. So next slide, please.
I have a question on that last example.
Yeah.
Why is there an assumption that English is a language spoken by both parties, or I'm just curious why English is in there?
Yeah, there is an effort among emergency services in Europe to try to map so that it is possible to handle multilingual calls, and the default is then to have at least an English-speaking person that they can hand off the call to. So there is a kind of database of the European emergency services, and they know where to transfer the call if this kind of language issues appear. There are, of course, 112 sites who can also handle other spoken languages than their home language and English. So English was just an example, but it is common that both relay service agents and 112 agents do not handle any other language in their calls than their home language, native language. So it is a complication. Is that a response?
Is that okay? Yeah.
Yeah.
For them, it's
I think we have a survey saying that 24 of 26 countries have now English-speaking 112 agents are able to transfer to such agents in each country, and that's good to have some common. So if we look at the next slide, please.
Yeah, you've got 3 minutes left on your
comments to simple use cases. I think we are on. Yeah. Yeah, some variations. We can now, the Italian sign language user calls again for 112 in Italy, but assume now that the Italian emergency service has got a special group with competence in Italian sign language. So the comparison during call setup then causes the call to be routed to that group, and no relay service is needed. And this is experienced better for the users, but quite hard to man and maintain. France is about to set up this kind of service. So this was about sign language, all of these examples, but very similar. We can look at users who prefer to have text both ways. So they indicate their preference for language in text, and similar selection and the invocation of relay services is made for that. And of course, also speech users without accessibility issues, speech users can also have their languages and language matches and get connected or get language translation invoked. The drawback here is, of course, that we need all users to use this feature in order to have efficient handling of it, efficient avoidance of getting relay services invoked for the cases when it's not needed. So I would think that some other means would be needed for some period until this is widespread. Now let's look at a few more complex use cases.
Gunnar,
Yeah.
you're a little over your time, so do you want to run through these last slides quickly, and then because we do have a little bit of overflow time, so if you want to run through these quickly and then we can move on.
Yeah, you promised me 20 minutes, didn't you?
I did indeed. We started a little early.
Huh?
That's
Oh yeah. So more complex use cases. When a speaking and hearing person also has competence in sign language, they want to express that so that they can have direct calls with sign language users, but normally they use just speech in all voice calls. That could be quite common among hearing persons in families where there are deaf persons, or other situations when you have sign language competence and similar. So there is a need to be able to specify one preferred language and a also possible language. So a possibility to specify that you don't need to fulfill all requirements. Next example is a person deaf by age who want to speak and read. That is a very common case. Yeah.
Oh, sorry, still on.
Still on this slide. You want to speak and read, and you want to express that in the settings so that you get text back, and that is added either by the other party or by a service in between. And now I'm off to next slide. Other more complex cases is indication of an acceptable fallback. For example, the Italian sign language user can, if sign language is not available, can accept to have a typed conversation. It is not as convenient and rapid as signing, but it's desired to have that possibility so that if the two parties can agree on using text back and forth instead. So that's one complication, one extra level of preference needed between languages in different modalities. And there is also a possibility to connect two kinds of relay services that may be needed before, for example, between a sign language user and a speech and text user. Let's see where we were. Yeah. So next slide, please. So these were a brief overview of use cases, mainly from the accessibility side. And what we see here is that we want to use these tags or whatever it will be, and we want to use it for invocation of relay services or matching what the call is about, either selecting participants or selecting the way they behave, or adding participants to the call, or routing the call. We have said that routing the call is, and the other selections and so on, is not included in the charter, but I see a strong need to check that what we reach to is usable, so that I think we need a document to be developed in parallel, talking about the use of these tags. I also want to mention the work we are doing in IETF94-SLIM-20151102-1710.webm that is titled the Total Conversation for Emergency Communication, and it is about the emergency call with a lot of accessibility issues, and we are describing the invocation of relay services, and see the use of SLIM as a good opportunity to sort out some of the use cases for us. We have just sent a liaison to ECREAT with a draft of our output report, and we suggest that SLIM is looking at the same liaison. And that's it, I think, what I prepared.
Thank you so much. We've got Brian at the mic.
There's some information about where to find more information about the CSDF on the next slide, but yes, I see Brian there.
Yeah. Brian Rosen. So we decided a while ago, based on a lot of discussion, that we were going to base the SIP usage of language in SDP. That comes with a whole bunch of advantages, but it does have some disadvantages. And even if we were doing it in SIP, the basic mechanism we have for negotiation is offer answer. And I'm very reluctant to get into changing the basic semantics of offer answer to deal with some of these use cases. And I'd really think that we need to get the M-Music, the guys who own the SDP thing, heavily involved in anything that goes beyond the basic, here's my list of offer, here's my answer that comes back. And a lot of the discussion that you're having here strikes me as not the basic offer answer. It's, well, under these conditions, think about it this way, and under those conditions, maybe it's that way, and you know, I've got these priorities, and I've got all this and all that. That's pretty far from where we currently are. And we haven't done anything like that, either in SIP or in SDP, and I'm very reluctant to get into that without getting more expertise and thinking really hard about what we need to do and how it might work. And so I mean, clearly it's a separate document, but I also think it's probably beyond our charter.
Okay, Randall's at you. Go ahead.
Randall Gallons, I just wanted to, I guess, reiterate what Brian's saying and point out that in general in the IETF, we make more progress by focusing on the most simple, most common use cases, get some deployment experience from that, and then build on to the more complex things later. If we try to tackle everything at once, we end up with something that's too complex to get deployed.
Yeah, Gunnar here.
This is Pete.
May I comment first? Of course, we probably don't need to fulfill all the complex use cases I listed. I pointed out some of them, and we can define that some are not in scope, but yeah, so let's see.
This is Pete Resnick. Brian, this is more of a question for you, I guess. I'm looking through the presentation. 95% of these use cases, even the complex ones, can be dealt with by a simple preference ordering, right? This one's my preference, this one's secondary, third, whatever. Can SDP not do that sort of stuff with offer answer?
What we have right now, what you can do is you can have a preference for languages within a media stream. What Gunnar wants, which we don't have, is a way to have a higher level preference there where you can say, I really prefer signed French, but if you can't do signed French, I'll do typed English with spoken Latin. That's what we don't have. And my point is, let's go with what we...
But let me get there. So signed English is not two things. There's American Sign Language, there's British Sign Language. Those are two different languages.
Right. That's
So that's just a set of languages, as far as I can tell.
This is Brian Rosen. So the problem is to do the complex cases, it requires interaction between modalities. That's the complication. It's not just within a modality do this. It's
right.
I want this video and this audio, or this video and this audio, or maybe just this audio. So that's where the complication gets in. It's across the modalities.
Right. So what we have now is we can handle most of the cases, or at least we can handle all the simpler cases. We can say, well, what we have now is a scenario where you just enable all the media that you can support with all the languages that you can do in the preference that they're listed per media stream. And then if you're not using one, or if you're using another one, that's fine. But what we don't have is the ability to have sets of media with languages for each media, and then you choose among those sets. And the question is, do we need that before, or can we go with what we have? And is that usable enough to be worth doing? Or should we say, no, we really shouldn't do anything unless we can do everything?
Okay, we will need to move on soon. So, Gunnar, thank you very much for presenting on that. If we have any comments on the use cases, let's talk about them later on or on the list. Cool, thank you, Gunnar.
Thanks.
Right. We're going to move on to the next section of our agenda, which is the proposed work items. Just to reiterate, we do have 2 proposed work items, and they are given here: the negotiating human language in real-time communications and the multiple language content type. We're going to have 2 presentations for those. Randall's going to present first, and then we're going to have Nick, who's going to be also presenting remotely. Randall, do you mind coming up now to present yours? Are you ready to present? Let me get your slides for you. Awesome. I got version 2. I was just, oh, wow, it works. Okay. Can you stand in the pink box to present so that people remotely can see you?
Hi, everybody. I'm Randall Gellens. This is draft that many of you have probably seen before. Others maybe not. So let's see. So the idea here is that we want a way to match the preferences for different languages per modality. And that this is, I don't really need to spend a lot of the time. I mean, I think we all understand why we need this. If you don't have context for which language you're using, you need something like this. And those cases are, in general, when you're calling a call center or emergency services. So in the particular cases we're talking about, the draft is focusing on general cases where a user is calling a call center or emergency services, which are really just a kind of a special case of the call center, where the call center has certain languages and modalities that they can support in-house. And they also, in many cases, have the ability to bridge in translation for language translation or relay to cross modalities. And the classic example of that would be PSAPs tend to support, at least in the US, they support text, as well as spoken, and they often have the ability to bring in a sign language interpreter. And they also have the ability to bring in spoken language interpretation. And so what's important is that both sides know what you ended up with, and that there's no ambiguity about what you're doing in the media. So this is, this slide's a little bit cut off. I'm not sure why, but anyway, yeah, okay. Let's back up one. Where are we? Right, so this is the general call center case, and what we have here is showing really that the call center has the ability to bring in translation or interpretation services as needed. And the call center can display the language and other information if it wants to the agent. And in the emergency case, it really looks pretty much the same. Emergency services have a little bit extra standardized functionality in the fact that they're usually going through an ESI net, at least in the United States. It's a little bit less clear whether Europe's going to have ESI nets. So the proposal is that there are new attributes for each stream that get negotiated in the SDP. This proposal has been kicking around for quite a long time. I think the first Orlando or the second Orlando meeting, not the most recent one. So the idea here is that each stream has a list of the languages using the RFC 5646 language tags, and those are listed in preference order. And then the user offers all of them in preference order, and the call center replies and accepts those that it can handle, or the one that it can handle, the most preferred one, per media. So there has been quite a lot of debate in the past about doing this in the SIP level versus doing this in the SDP level. I believe this was all hashed out a number of times, most recently at the last IETF, where we agreed that we would proceed using SDP for this case, and we would take out all mention of routing and defer routing for a different document. So hence this draft focuses on what we now are calling labeling. So this version of the draft that was actually published this morning is version 03. I don't know if everybody's had a chance to look at that. It's basically 02, except that it removed the use cases and it removed all discussion of routing. And both of those were outcomes from the face-to-face SLIM, ad hoc discussion that was held at the last IETF. So I believe this draft is ready for working group adoption and, in fact, for last call. The only potential issue is whether we even need the draft at all. Gunnar pointed out on the list that there was some clarification in M-Music that the existing lang attribute could be used. If so, you can make a case that we just negotiate with that, and then we don't even need to do any of this stuff, and we can then just go do the email part and go home.
Brilliant, thank you. Thanks, Wendell. So does anybody have any questions or discussion topics on the draft? That's slam dunk. Cool, thank you so much. In the session after Nick has done his presentation, we'll talk about adopting the drafts, and so we'll just go through that decision then. Awesome. Right, let me just go through the agenda. After Randall, we have Nick Tompkinson, who's going to be presenting on multiple language content type. Nick, are you on the Meet Echo?
Yep, I am here.
I really
hope you can hear me.
Yes, we can. That's
Is the volume good?
Cool. Yeah, that's perfect. If you might want to come a little closer to the mic, maybe. Try again.
Okay, is any better?
Yeah, that's good. Thank you. I'll drive the slides. Just tell me which slide you want me to go to.
Okay, the first one's good for the moment. So good afternoon, everyone. I'm going to be briefly going through the non-real-time draft, which is the multilingual content type, which is, in other words, multi-language email. And that's the draft name on the screen, and it's currently at version 02. But I do have some pending changes that I will be submitting as soon as the submission tool is available again, which I think is tonight. Okay, next slide, please. Okay, so there's two main problems that we're attempting to address with this draft. The first is sending email to recipients that have got unknown preferred languages, especially where the poor results of machine language translation isn't acceptable. So, for example, announcements for customers, clients, and sales prospects. And the second, excuse me, the second issue that we're trying to address is single language email conversations stifling collaborative communication in a team that spans multiple languages. And the idea of that is to try to promote inclusivity in email. And with the internet draft, we're aiming to go some distance to resolving these. So next slide, please. So the important points that that make this stand out and different from normal everyday email are as follows. Firstly, there'll be a new multi-part type called multi-part multilingual, which works in a very similar way to multi-part alternative, in that each of the parts is an alternative version of the same message. And by using a brand new multi-part, we get a level of predictability in how the legacy email clients behave. And we get both simplicity and reduced risk in new implementations for conforming email clients. And then there'll be a multilingual preface at the top of the email, which will be shown just to non-conforming clients only. And this should explain to those recipients that the email is made up of multiple language parts, multiple translations, and they're likely to be either all displayed in line or as individual attachments. And this is typically the way that clients render multi-part mixed, which is the way that non-conforming clients will fall back to when they don't understand the multi-part multilingual type. So the email clients will select the message part to show to the recipient by using a combination of the recipient's preferred language settings and their preferred translation type settings. So, and the second one is, in other words, that's a way of saying that they would prefer a human translation, maybe in their second language, over a machine translation in their first language, just because of the level of quality of the translation. And this is a solution that is to an issue that was raised a couple of meetings back about how the regular internet deals with preferred languages and machine translation combinations. So there's also another feature is there's additional alternative subjects for the email. So each one of these will be in each of the languages that the email will be sent in. And this is for things like inbox views, list views of email, so that you can see the subject in the language that is your preferred language. And the last part is right at the end of the email is an optional part, which can be a language independent message part. And this can be shown to the recipients whose email clients cannot find a preferred language match out of the different translations in email. And they may not be able to understand the first message part, which acts as the default message part. Next slide, please. Okay, this is a very simplified example of the message structure. It has the usual headers at the top, but then it uses the new multi-part type, which is multilingual. And after that, there's the multilingual preface, which says basically the same thing in English and Spanish. It just tells them about the message parts and how they could be displayed. Then after that, there's the individual translations, and they're identified by the content language tag and a translation type tag or parameter. Sorry. And in this example, we've got one translation in English and then followed by a translation in Spanish. The first one is, you can see, is the original, because it says translation type original. And the second one is a human translation. So it's got translation type human. And using those two tags, the client can work out which one to present to the recipient. And as for the content type of the two translations, in this example, it's just simply plain text, but there's no reason why it can't be a multi-part type as well. So, for example, the first one could be multi-part alternative, and then nested inside that, it could be text and HTML, and the Spanish one could be a multi-part mixed with various sections under that, you know, with attachments and whatever. No reason at all. So next slide, please. So regarding the status, I believe it's near to completion. It certainly feels like it, but I'm still keen for more input. I've recently started compiling an FAQ page on the SLIM wiki, and that's the address on the screen there. It currently it answers a handful of questions that I've had so far, and I'm planning to really flesh this out over the next few weeks and months. The idea of that is just so that new people joining in the conversation don't just keep asking the same questions over and over again. So we're progressing pretty well so far, and most of the discussion is happening on the SLIM list. So if you're interested, please join up the conversation there. The next stage for me really is I'm very keen to get some trials of the new message format going, especially regarding backward compatibility with existing email clients, and hopefully starting to get some proof of concept implementations going. I've started it internally at Mimecast, where I work, but I'd like to get a much wider group of people interested and to join in and to really help fine-tune the spec and ensure that we get the best chance of it being widely accepted and picked up after publication. The details are on the SLIM list for that, so if you're interested in doing that, then have a look and join in, sign up. Yeah, like I said earlier, there are some pending changes for an 03 version of the draft, and that will be submitted as soon as I can. But that's all from me. Thanks. That's everything. Any questions?
Oh, sorry. Pete, go ahead.
Pete Resnick, a suggestion. Please do not make the internal parts text plain. Make them message/RFC 822 so that existing implementations will treat the internal things as messages that have subjects, that could have multi-parts, that could have all sorts of things underneath them. Makes much more sense.
Okay.
Randall Gallons, I just had a question about the unmatched part. In rereading the draft, I was, can you give me a use case other than the one that's listed in there of the language independent graphic?
Sorry, which slide did you want?
Anyway, what my point is that if there are use cases other than what you mentioned, and in fact, even with the unmatched graphic, you might want to allow for more than one of these, because if you're talking about graphics that are being shown with any of the message parts, any of the different language parts, then you would potentially have more than one of them. And then the other question is if there is no other use case other than that one, then maybe you just want to mention in the draft that that's what it's really for.
Okay.
This is John Levine. I guess I have a comment and a question or two. Mail is unusual in that it is dominated by a handful of very large providers. However, all of the large providers I know are extremely multinational. I'm wondering, have you talked to any of the usual giant suspects about trialing this? And if not, I can make some suggestions.
I'd certainly like some suggestions. I haven't quite got to the stage yet.
Yeah, I mean, I'll send something to the SLIM list. The other, my main concern is that the security considerations are grossly insufficient because they make the charmingly naive assumption that the various parts say the same thing. And, you know, so like the first thing is like you need to make it clear that you can have multiple things that are original. I mean, but beyond that, you know, like those of us who worry about spam filtering is like this offers so many ways to sneak stuff past. I mean, none of this is insoluble. But it's just stuff that it would be nicer to solve it before you started showing horrible pictures to mail users whose main language is not the one that their spam filters understand, rather than after.
Thank you. One more question.
Hi, Sean Leonard. To, I guess, follow up on Pete Regs's comment about message/RFC822, I just wanted to suggest that you consider message/global for its internationalization support. And that also means that software that interprets this will need to use UTF-8, and which is obvious, but you know, it's more dependencies and more requirements that people should be aware of, because there are other requirements on the structure of messages that the EAI standards call for.
Okay.
Great, thank you. So we have no more questions in the room. Nick, thank you so much for creating the presentation and presenting remotely. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Right, we'll move on now to our next agenda item, which is other possible work items. Bernard is going to take us through that based on some of the discussions that we've been having today. Bernard, are you on?
Yes,
Oh, you are here.
can you hear me? Yeah. So, well, we talked about the security issue, which is outside the working group and will be handled AD sponsored. I think the only other thing that comes up from this meeting is maybe to understand better exactly what use cases we can handle and what ones we cannot handle within offer answer, and understand whether it really matters or not. I think, Brian, you said that the issue was really between media, so but we are able to negotiate within media language preference. So I guess the big question I would have is does it really is that material in terms of not being able to do something? So that's about the only gap that I can see based on what we've talked about. Now Gunnar, I guess from his suggestion, it was he purely talking about routing which is out of scope, or was there some suggestion of a discussion of the use cases as well?
There was some discussion of the use cases, but he did state that routing was out of scope.
Right.
Yeah, Gunnar here. Yes, we have agreed that the routing is out of scope, but then we need a parallel work somewhere to verify that the result from SLIM is usable for routing and selection and so on. So, but that is also out of scope for the group, I guess.
Well,
or can we start?
I think certainly a description. Yeah.
Sorry.
Well, certainly a description of what's doable within offer answer is within scope, I would think. And
Brian Rosen. So
isn't that
Brian's
wrong?
in the queue.
This is Brian Rosen. So I think we've agreed that the routing stuff is out of scope. I think we all agree that follow-up work is going to get done. We're not really sure where the exact right place to do it is, that describe how we achieve some of these things. There's the generic problem of invoking translation. There's the emergency case routing that that I know, and some extensions to it that Gunnar was talking about in some of these more complex cases. I think we're going to have some work. I think it's beyond our current charter. So we'll have to finish what we've got, get the marking done, and then turn someone's attention, whether it's recharter here or work in one of the SIP groups or something else, on how to get some of these mechanisms that we are now able to accomplish, given that we've got the marking done.
And Gunnar here, if I should repeat what seems to be needed beyond the simple one media language indication to cover most of my use cases is the directionality, to say that I want to use video for output but text for input.
I think that is possible within offer answer, wouldn't it? That, Brian, that would be possible, right? To say I want to receive real-time text, for example, but send ASL.
That's in the draft now.
Yeah, so that's
perhaps the only reason to keep the draft. It's perhaps the only reason to keep the draft instead of just using the lang attribute that exists, assuming that the recent email about that is correct. Would be because what's in the draft now allows you to say, this is what I'm sending and this is what I'm receiving.
Right. Yeah, so I think just to clarify Brian's point, Gunnar, I think the issue specifically would be someone who says, I would prefer to send and receive ASL over video, but if I can't, then my fallback would be English with real-time text, right? But you could negotiate both. You could have an English real-time text channel and an ASL channel. It's just that preference that can't be expressed, if I'm getting you right, Brian, right?
You can always have preference on choices. I mean, that's standard part of offer answer, but you can't, we're back to the same problem of within one media, you can do that.
Right.
But between medias, you can't.
Right.
Right. What Bernard just said is absolutely what you would end up doing, is that you say, well, I want to do video with ASL, and I also want to do text. And then if you get both, you just use the video, and more likely you would just end up with,
Yeah, so that's what I mean by exploring whether it really makes a difference or not. Like if you end up with both, is that a serious problem? Are there cases where it would be or wouldn't be?
Yes, Gunnar here. It is because these indications also indicate to the other party how they are supposed to behave. I mean, you indicate that I want to use sign language out and text back, and the combination of it, that makes the other party start to respond in text when they see that, this person wants to use text, rather than just indicating these two media separately. Don't cause the start of the session to flow.
But I think we said we could express the directionality that way. So if for example, if I could speak, but so at that part I think we have. Anyway, it might be worthwhile to clarify exactly what we don't have and what we do have, and maybe understand a little better what difference it makes.
Yeah, I mean, I think the question for the group really is it worth going forward with what we have, or is that going to be so broken and unusable that it's dangerous and we shouldn't do it. And I'd say it is worth pursuing because we can always add complexity later.
This is Pete Resnick. I really don't get the problem that Gunnar has here. If I give an offer on one media stream for I'll take sign language, on another for I'll take text, the recipient of that offer has two choices. They either say yes to each, if they can do it, and then they provide both of those, or they say yes to one because they can't do the other one. And they were going to say that whether there was a preference expressed or not. So the choice here is you do them both or you do the one that you're able to do. And then it's for the sender to sort out which one they're going to actually present to the user. That's a user interface issue.
Right.
And, you know, furthermore, worst case, you end up with more media than you really wanted, but humans have a great ability to decide what they're going to do, and you don't have to do everything. You don't have to sign, or you don't have to text if you can sign, and so forth. So I don't see it as being dangerous. And I would say that not every human capability needs to be expressed technically.
Yeah, sorry, we ended up discussing where the contents of the real-time draft instead of your task to describe what new work items we should handle. I think these discussions are totally.
Yeah, it's. I think the end result of it is having a good understanding of what we can do now is, of course, very important to understand whether there's a need for new work. So that's, I think, the question is just making it very clear what the full scope of everything we can do with what we have.
So does this, since we haven't made really a decision on that particular point, does this block one of the items, or can we still accept both drafts and move forward with this discussion on the mailing list?
Yeah, I don't think it blocks anything. It just is a request to understand the scope of what the drafts can do.
Okay, great. So for people in the room, I guess we're probably at a point where we can make a decision as to accept the proposed items as working group items. So how many people in the room have read the drafts? I'll be surprised, Randall, if you haven't read your own draft. Cool. All right. On the basis of that, we could probably make some decisions. AD, do you require that we hum for this, or are you okay with show of hands? Okay, that's fine. Decision is mine. Show of hands is fine. Who is in favor of? Actually, no. I'm going to do the IETF way. Let's do the humming. Let's start slim the way we intend to continue. I've got a mic, so I can really go. No. Let's start with. I need this on my screen because I can't read like that. So let's start with negotiating human language in real-time communications. Randall's draft to accept. Please hum now. Those who don't want to accept the draft as a working item, hum now. Okay, we accept it as a working item, fantastic. And then we'll go for Nick's multiple language content type. Those who want to accept, hum now. Those who don't want to accept, hum now. Oh, that sounds very good. Great. Okay, so both drafts have been accepted as working group items. We need to discuss some of the scope, I think, for the real time, well, for the issues that we were discussing right now, but we can talk about that more on the list. Bernard, do you want to add anything to that at all?
No, I'm fine.
Great. Cool. All right, that's perfect. Thank you so much for that. We're probably going to finish a little early, which is good because everybody's probably dreaming of beer like I am. So just to go through the last agenda item that we have is work methods and group management. I'll keep it quick so we can leave a little early. This is probably a silly thing to put up here. I hope everybody's read it. I've read it. If anybody does have any issues understanding how work is done at the IETF, there's a lot of stuff you can read. I recommend starting with this, the IETF DAO, and the link is there if you want to go ahead and read it. Takes into account all of those items up there, including how the IETF is run, how to start writing RFCs and internet drafts, and how to contribute. So any newcomers, please go ahead and take a look. Ask me questions if you have any problems. I wanted to talk about work methods. Currently, we're taking a very traditional IETF approach to this group. We're running everything on through our mailing list. We have a data tracker set up, and all the items are on there. Nick is already contributing to our wiki, and that's not something I put up on this page, but we will get that active as well. Thank you to the contributions from Nick. That's already started. In terms of meetings and work, we will conduct most of our work on the mailing list and hold meetings at IETFs as we go on. We will not hold teleconferences, and we will not hold interim meetings unless they are necessary. And it doesn't take a lot for something to be necessary. If there's a need for it, we will set it up. So if you feel like one is necessary for a particular point, please let me know and we could get that sorted for you. But this is how we'll go for the time being. As we get more authors in, maybe we'll adapt to some of the ways that more editors in, we might adapt to how they want to go ahead and work. We're not using GitHub right now. Maybe that will happen later on, but right now we'll stick to the traditional methods. I've put Jabber there with a question mark. In W3C, I tend to keep an IRC channel open all of the time. We won't do that for this group, but if people do want to keep Jabber open all the time, please let me know afterwards. I'm sure I can make that happen. I think you'll probably get more traction by sending something to the mailing list than you will do something to the Jabber outside of IETF meetings times. Newbies, check out the IETF tools page for any other tools. Cool. Let's go on. So I went through group management already. We will hold 1 or 2 meetings at IETF depending on what's needed, and do things on the mailing list. So just any other suggestions from the group of how to group manage? No, that sounds good. Attending 4 IETF meetings has made me an expert on this, I guess. Not really. Cool. All right. So we'll move on to our last item, which is any other business or any other things that anybody wants to talk about. Great beers of Japan. I can do some of that, I guess. Great. Okay. So thank you so much for attending. We will collect all the minutes together. We will release that on the mailing list. We will upgrade our proposed working group items to official working group items. We'll take some of the discussions from this onto the mailing list, and we'll start working through those to push them forward for last call. We'll see how it goes. Mark Nottingham did give me one piece of advice, which was to say what our outlook is for this group. I hope that we could get this stuff done and dusted within a year. I'm looking at famous people in the room seeing it. Why are you smiling? A year, it's going to happen. Hopefully faster than that. Actually, do you know what? Just Buenos Aires, we can be done by then. No, that it's going to be great. So yeah, so let's aim for that. But yeah, just throw in the air. Cool. All right. You're all free and be merry.
And thank you, Natasha, for your first day of chairing.
頑張りました。Thank you so much. I didn't know you were there. Because yeah, we're like chatting everything else. I didn't use the extra contributions for that. Yeah, thank you.